The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The Derbyshire Dales series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Hello folks, welcome back to the Derbyshire Dales once again. Now in today's episode we will be seeing some beautiful views from the top of one of these magnificent gritstone escarpments. I'm only halfway up the escarpment at this point right here, but already my view is mega. Check this out. Now down there is the village which this all belongs to. It's the one which is over the Derwent from Calver, if you can remember that episode a few months ago. This is Curbar. Curbar, Cordar's fort. With Baslow behind us, there are 3 left in the northeastern corner of the Derbyshire Dales district, all 3 of which are going to involve some pretty steep gradients. Today we're in Curbar, the village that sits on the opposite side of the River Derwent to Calver. You may recall we crossed the river to get to Curbar in that episode before turning around again. Curbar is very much Calver's little brother. Situated a mile north of Baslow on the edge of the Derwent, Curbar is very tight, narrow and built into a huge hillside. It's one of the most expensive villages in the entire country. Indeed, there's one street called Bar Road that has the highest average house value in Derbyshire. Curbar has a limited number of landmarks, but some of them are quite unusual. Here we'll take in the run-of-the-mill stuff like the church, the pub and the school for example, but how many observatories have we seen on TVI? Not many. There's one of them here though. Curbar also has a college to cover too, a short way from that. To the east are an array of popular rock climbing escarpments which form Curbar Edge and Baslow Edge. Formed millions of years ago when Derbyshire was under the sea, the edges have been used not just by rock climbers in their time, but also by paragliders, birdwatchers and even artists. We'll be climbing onto Curbar Edge to get a good look at the view they offer us at the top. There are some good bits to discuss in this one too, like the old Maybow custom, once performed by the villagers, but now only undertaken by children attending the local primary school. It's rough and rocky out here, so let's get our boots on and go climbing. So, yesterday we spoke at length about the East Moors at the end of the Baslow and Bubnell episode. We saw in pictorial form some of the various edges to the north of Baslow. Curbar Edge is another, except this time we're off to see it for ourselves. A gritstone moorland escarpment above the main village, Curbar Edge is on average 958 feet above sea level. The elevation varies depending on where you are. At its lowest point you're still 387 feet above sea level, the highest point is almost 1300. It's regarded as a significant location for rock climbing, both regionally and nationally, in terms of both the historical development of the sport and as the location of first ascents. Curbar Edge was formed millions of years ago. It was within the delta of a vast stream that deposited sand and dust across southern Britain. Because of currents and tides, muds deposited in deeper water became shales and the sands became gritstone. That's what Curbar Edge is. The edges are characteristic overhangs formed by erosion underneath the harder gritstone top of the moorland. Particularly severe wind erosion in the extremely cold and dry conditions during the last glacial period picked out the weaker layers. This defined the sculptural features of the edge today. A range of prehistoric remains are located in the area around Curbar Edge. Ancient cairns exist to the east near Froggatt Edge and to the west in Stoke Flat West. On Curbar Edge itself is a round cairn that's dated to the Bronze Age. It's a prehistoric funeral monument with a single burial placed inside, covered in a gritstone cist. The cairn was discovered in 1913 by John Manners, the 9th Duke of Rutland, and his gamekeeper. Manners was the owner of the land at that time. The edge is loaded with other things to discover. Take the Bible stones, for example, created by Edwin Gregory, a former mole catcher for the Duke of Devonshire. The Romans are believed to have been the first people group to exploit Curbar's gritstone resources. Curbar Gap at the southern end of the edge is crossed by a Roman road. That would have provided them easy access for quarrying. Curbar Gap was also important for another reason: the transportation of salt. In the 11th century, traders carrying salt from Cheshire to Yorkshire, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire did so using pack horses. One of the viable pack horse routes, discovered in 1272, led to Buxton from Fairfield and through Saltersford. Traders would use Curbar Gap to reach Chesterfield, entering the town via Saltergate. There are no quarries on the edges these days. There are many former and assumed quarry sites though. Exact quarry locations are often unknown. What is known is that the Curbar Edge quarry sat within one of 4 areas of Derbyshire that produced millstones to grind grey flour. Millstone production on Curbar Edge came to an end at some point in the early 19th century, most likely 1811. Curbar Edge today is a great spot for rock climbing. Some of the earliest known climbing activity was done by Peak District pioneer Jim Puttrell. Very early climbing attempts were made on Curbar in the 1900s, but it was finally ascended by Chapman and Tomset of the Polaris Mountaineering Club in 1948. By 1999, there were over 150 different named rock climbing routes on Curbar Edge, in addition to a wide range of bouldering problem routes. In July 2015, 3 routes at Curbar named Dr. Dolittle, The Zone and Knocking on Heaven's Door were ranked within the top 20 hardest traditional climbs in the UK. Because of its particular conditions, Curbar Edge is also a suitable hand gliding and paragliding location for expert pilots. Curbar Edge is a great spot for bird watchers too. Dippers, robins, blackbirds, herons, pheasants, sparrows and great tits can all be found here. Birds of prey like barn owls, buzzards, kestrels and little owls are also frequent visitors too, and vital parts of the local ecology. On land, other animals such as Highland cattle or grouse define the area. The path along Curbar Edge is part of several long-distance walks, including the 25-mile eastern edges of the Peak District. We last touched that in Hathersage when we climbed Stanage Edge. Curbar Edge is cited in the title of the poem Night on Curbar Edge, written by William Watson. In art, the edge was painted by the local Derbyshire artist Martin Davis in 2013. And Curbar Edge is featured in several films, including 1984's Threads, 1996's The Big Issue, 1998's Hard Grit, 2009's Grit Flick, and 2012's Wide Boys. When I looked at the weather forecast this morning, it said there was some rain due to come across, but it hasn't materialised. We still have beautiful blue sky, don't we? And that is what you want when you're climbing Curbar Edge, or Baslow Edge, or Birchen Edge, or any of the other edges around here. You definitely want the weather to look good. And it is. Beautiful, isn't it? Let's drive down into Curbar village now. Curbar is a very tight and narrow little place. It's built into a hillside which slopes down into the Derwent Valley. Now, due to the gradients involved in its upper reaches, I've decided the best way to cover most of this is by using the cart as opposed to walking. We will get a little walk at the end though. The landscape here hasn't changed much over the last 500 years, and the view from Curbar Edge is still considered one of the finest in the country. Early records of the name Curbar include Cordberg in 1203, Cordsbur in 1285, Quardborough in 1346, Cordbor in 1356, Corberg in 1365, Corsbur in 1423, and Corber in 1577. All of those translate to originally being Corder's fortified place. The personal name is not absolutely certain, as a number of possible names would fit instead. Now, here's a little known fact. Mention the plague to anyone and the first village they'll think of out here is Eyam. Curbar was also a plague village. It has the dubious honour, if you can call it that, of hosting the plague before it ever got to Eyam. It has tombs of plague victims dated 1632. That's 30 years before Eyam was hit. Curbar's plague graves are evident in several parts of the village. The most famous are the Cundy graves, which are occupied by members of the Cundy family. Victims of the plague in 1632, they were farmers at Grislowfield Farm. It's not known who buried the family, but we do know who lies in the graves. They belong to Thomas and Ada Cundy and their children Olive, Nellie and Thomas Jr. They each have a slab carved with their initials. Other Curbar plague tombs can be found below the Wesleyan Reformed Chapel further down the village. Grislow Field still exists, by the way. The name is Saxon and means gristly open land. The area is not very good agriculturally, and it only has a thin layer of soil. It's very rocky otherwise. Now trust me, it's got some good landmarks, has Curbar village, and the first one of them is one that's just to the north of Lane Farm, and here it is there. Now look at that very strange shaped building. What could that be, I wonder? Let's find out. We will be making several stops as we drive through the village because there are some quite incredible landmarks here. How about this place for starters? Known as the Jagger House, this is a lockup built in around 1780. It was used to hold prisoners in overnight custody while they were in transit to other prisons or court hearings. It has an unusual conical shaped roof and stands alone in the corner of a field not far from the Cundy Graves, northeast of Lane Farm. It has 2 rooms, one up and one down. A chimney was built in later years for a fireplace on the ground floor when it was converted into a dwelling, and it's said to have been inhabited until just before the start of World War II. One local tradition says that this was used as a pest house, a commonly owned building often on the fringes of villages that were struck down with the plague or other infectious ailments. The idea was that the victims could be rehoused in them until the illness took its course, resulting in either recovery or indeed death. Think of it as an early form of quarantine. For Curbar, this would have been the ideal spot. It was close enough to keep an eye on, but far enough away from the main body of population to avoid contagion. Since it was built in 1780, it's unlikely that it would have been used to house plague sufferers, but could have taken anyone suffering from just about anything, including leprosy or cholera. As domestic accommodation, it's known a sailor called Francis Pelly lived here, as well as a local deaf-mute named Ebenezer Barrett. He was known as Yebby and was the last permanent resident. And even though this road that runs down to Lane Farm here is private, you can still see the Jagger House perfectly legally because that footpath that we were on just there runs right past the building and you can get a really good view of it. Now, we're going to drive around the rest of Curbar now. Now, there's quite a lot of steep hills, lots of gradients around here, so the car is definitely the best way to do this. Back in the car, let's head for the centre of the village next, defined by a well and a flagpole. Curbar has a history of farming, although the number of farms has decreased to 0 over the past century. The population, though, has remained relatively stable. In 1891 there were 336 inhabitants, and in 1895 there were 16 farms. Today there are no working farms, but the number of inhabitants has increased. Curbar used to be part of the Duke of Rutland's estate until the 1920s. In 1927, the Duke sold Curbar off at a public auction in Bakewell. Most of the tenants bought their own properties and family descendants still own several of them now. Spreading out from the centre of the village are lanes of very exclusive, large houses. Curbar has the highest average house value of any village, town or city in Derbyshire. So here we are at the centre of the village, small with a cluster of lovely stone cottages at its heart. Check this out, this here is an unusual well surrounded by millstones. At one point this was the main water supply for the village. Next to the well is a tall flagpole. I guess you could define that as being the dead centre. Okay, if you turn left at the well there, you come down into this area here, which is a bit flatter than everything I've seen so far here in Curbar. Now we've come down here to see an old chapel, which is somewhere there. Ah, there we are, there it is, hiding behind this house here. Down the hill slightly, we come to Curbar's Methodist Chapel, built in 1861. It's located on Chapel Walk. It's a single-storey, two-bay structure made of coursed rubble gritstone with a Welsh slated roof. The chapel features a prominent gabled porch and tall rectangular windows. It was established by the Wesleyan Reformed Church and was built after Calver's primitive Methodist Chapel, which is now Calver Methodist Church. We saw that a while back now. Now, speaking of Methodism, Curbar has a lot more to tell us about it. If you leave the village centre to the south, you'll see what I mean. We've got two landmarks to see that aren't at first all that obvious when you drive through Curbar. They both sit on a road called Cliff Lane. That's this one we're on now. Narrow and surrounded by typical Derbyshire dry stone walls, this begins fairly flat but starts to dip down considerably towards the end. About halfway down the hill is a very unusual property, one we don't see many of at all. It's an old observatory. These days it's a guest house and it has some pretty decent reviews if you know where to look online. Now, why would Curbar have an old observatory? Well, when it was in operation it was used by Henry Guinness, a writer on prophetic subjects, Roman Catholicism, science and philosophy. He also had an interest in astronomy. He built this observatory on Cliff Lane, equipping it with a powerful telescope. Combining his love of writing and his observations of the night sky, he wrote a book. It was called The Approaching End of the Age, and in it he postulated that the world would end soon, probably in 1919. He was, of course, totally wrong. It's a good job that Guinness had other things to say about the world, and other things to occupy his time too. That brings us to Cliff College, further down the hill. Cliff College has been an important local landmark in Curbar since 1883. Today it provides training and seminars for the Methodist community. It's based within a property called Cliff House. To understand this, we need to know a bit more about Henry Guinness. As well as being an astronomer and a writer, he was also the founder of Harley College in London. That was an evangelical training school, and a really good one at that. It became so successful that it needed a larger home, and this was to become it. It's believed the site for Cliff College was first offered to Henry Guinness by Elizabeth Hume, the widow of a recorder from Salford. Elizabeth was the daughter and heiress of Thomas Gardam, the last in the male line of the family of Gardam, who had lived at Cliff House for several generations previously. Cliff House was built in 1790 by Gardam. His son-in-law, James Hilton Hume, Elizabeth's husband, extended the house and built a congregational chapel for public worship. This had regular baptisms and weddings and some form of schooling for local children. In 1876, Cliff House was finally acquired by Henry Guinness. He spent an astonishing £15,000 on beautifying the grounds of his new property, which he renamed Hume Cliff College. It quickly became a centre for training missionaries until 1901. Many of those missionaries went on to work in South America and China, with over 50 of them laying down their lives in the Congo. The wider story of Cliff College is deeply rooted in the work of the Methodist minister Thomas Champness, who in 1883 launched the hugely influential Joyful News newspaper. His Joyful News training home and mission was later encompassed by the Wesleyan Methodist Church, which in 1904 moved the college to its present location under Principal Thomas Cook. At that time, the site had a massive astronomical observatory, built by Guinness of course, and below it was a museum containing Cook's magnificent collection of shells and missionary trophies. Cook died shortly before World War I to be succeeded by the Reverend Samuel Chadwick, a big name in the history of the college. It was he who established the team mission, a major and ongoing event. In office throughout World War I, Chadwick witnessed the transfer of students to the battlefields and the closure of the college until 1919. The campus was further extended in the 1930s with the addition of Chadwick Memorial Chapel and a tea hall large enough to feed hundreds during major gatherings. Cliff closed again as a college for the duration of World War II, when the premises were occupied by the Sheffield High School for Girls. Under Chadwick, the annual Whitsuntide anniversary used to attract some 5,000 visitors, far too many to be accommodated on site. Large numbers took to bed and breakfasts in private homes around Calver and Curbar. The gatherings were so big they required specially chartered anniversary trains. These included the famous Hallelujah Express from London to Grindleford. Large crowds would walk across the fields to Cliff from Grindleford station. The greatest ever anniversary meeting was in 1954 when 60,000 came to hear the American evangelist Billy Graham. The crowds arrived via 1,000 coaches, hundreds of cars and buses running shuttle services from Sheffield, Chesterfield and Grindleford station. Graham was a regular visitor to the college during the Whitsuntide gatherings of the 1960s, but he never managed to top the madness of 1954. Although it was rare for Cliff's students to carry out any paid work, some were allowed to provide labour when the Derwent Dams project reached the vicinity of the college. In more recent times, Cliff has played other unsung roles. When Stony Middleton was flooded in 1968, for instance, students were quickly on hand to help the villagers out. Today, there's a playgroup on the Cliff campus serving the surrounding community, whilst the conference centre hosts groups from far and wide and of all religious persuasions. The anniversary weekend has now developed into a festival held over the spring bank holiday every year. So now it's time for a walk, and it's not going to be a long one this. Most of the village has already been covered using the car. Curbar's main landmarks, 4 of them, all sit next to the Derwent. The earliest educational establishment in Curbar seems to have been something called Ford School, which was set up in the late 17th century. Modern schooling is provided by Curbar Primary School, which serves the 3 villages of Curbar, Calver and Froggatt. This school is the custodian of an old May custom known as the Maybough. On the 1st of May, or as soon as possible thereafter, a tree branch is brought into the school and decorated with flowers by the children. It's known then as the Maybough. It's taken to various points in Curbar and Calver, where it's displayed to the accompaniment of songs and a dance. Several attempts have been made to ascertain the origin of the Maybough. The event was originally performed by the villagers rather than the school. Since World War I, though, it's been a school tradition. The second of the 4 Derwent side landmarks is one we've seen briefly before. This is the Bridge Inn, which we last captured when we crossed the river from Calver to this very point. The Bridge Inn that stands here today is not the original. It's believed to stand on the site of a previous structure. The original Bridge Inn is believed to have been built in the 1700s, with the current building constructed in 1930 using stone from the original. The bridge stands as an ancient crossing point of the Derwent. This and the packhorse trade route between Sheffield and Manchester was key to the development of Curbar. Yeah, there is a certain sense of deja vu stood here right here at the moment, because obviously the bridge there, which we crossed to get to Curbar when we were in the Calver episode, is very familiar, and of course so is the Bridge Inn too. It's a bit weird. We're on the other side of the bridge, and at first it feels like a whole different world, but when you get to this point here, it does feel very familiar. Now the next landmark was supposed to be this thing you can see to the right hand side of shot here. Now that, as far as I was aware before coming here, was the village hall, but apparently it's not. It's a scout hut. I thought it was the village hall, but never mind. It doesn't matter. It's a scout hut and it's there. We've covered it. That means we can skip forward straight to our last landmark, which is in the other direction, and that would be this church. Curbar's church is dedicated to All Saints. This was built in 1868 on land made available by the Duke of Rutland. The school soon followed suit in 1871, by the way, with an adjacent house built for the schoolmaster. The ecclesiastical parish of Curbar was formed in 1869 from that of Baslow St Anne and included the townships of Calver and Froggatt. It would be a few years before it got its own church, but this small edifice of stone in the early English style does for the village quite nicely. It consists of a chancel, a nave of 3 bays, a south aisle, a south porch and a small western turret containing 1 bell. There are 350 sittings inside. And so, with all that visited, our last task is a simple one, driving north to the next one. Tomorrow we're going to be in a place that's similar to Curbar, just a scaled down version. There's more rock climbing to be done, and we'll also get a look at one of Derbyshire's lesser known pubs. See you there, everyone. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.